My stepmother tried to take control of my life, so I took back what was mine. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. I met Vivian at a notary office that smelled like toner and lemon cleaner. She sat opposite me with the quiet certainty of someone who already owned the room, set her leather folder down, and slid a stack of papers across the desk. "Alan needs continuity," she said, using my father's first name the way people say the estate. On top was a durable power of attorney, but the line highlighted for me wasn't the agent. It was a waiver of objection, a tidy checkbox that would silence me in any dispute. I teach seniors how to recover hacked accounts and set up two-step logins. My job is ordinary and useful, the kind you miss only when it's gone. After Dad's minor stroke, I handled his phone updates and password resets while he learned to balance again. Vivian began streamlining, her favorite verb. Now she wanted the notary to bless her version of streamlining forever. She had brought her own blue pen. The notary studied us the way airport security studies shoes. Impersonal, alert, already tired. "We can proceed when you're comfortable," she said, which is what people say right before explaining why you should be comfortable right now. Vivian opened the folder to a tab marked emergency, then to one marked refinance, then to one marked care plan. Every page said the same thing in different fonts. "Let me handle this." I slid the top document back an inch and asked for copies, and the notary's eyes flicked up as if a small alarm had sounded. I took my wallet out and laid my library ID on the table, the one that says Digital Literacy Instructor. "Unity without clarity is compliance," I said, not raising my voice because loudness is not the same thing as authority. Behind the glass wall, a man signed something with his left hand, then wiped his eyes with his right. The notary adjusted her stamp and asked if we were ready. I thought about the first rule I teach. If you feel rushed, you slow down twice. Vivian leaned in, perfume like pears and clean paper. "Jordan," she said, "your father can't weather conflict." She turned the waiver toward me, so the box stared up like a small mouth. "This is kindness," she added, and the word kindness felt suddenly heavy, like a blanket pressed over a face. The notary clicked her pen and waited. Then she whispered, "Sign it now, or lose him forever." Vivian arrived after my mother's last winter. She volunteered at the hospice thrift store where Mom used to bring boxes of paperbacks, and she spoke in catalog pages, linens, light, intention. Dad found her soothing, a tide that covered sharp rocks. She started with small, polite corrections. "Let's keep the shoes in the foyer," and "we should centralize all chargers," and "Jordy, your tech terms overwhelm him." The corrections became rules. She curated the shelves until my mother's uneven pottery bowls sat behind glass like artifacts rescued from a less tasteful era. On Sundays, she introduced gentle routines that edged my traditions out. The pantry labels multiplied until even the cinnamon had a destination. Stewardship, she called it. I called it rearranging a person until he can't find himself. When Dad's clots stole his balance for a week, Vivian slid into decisions like a practiced pianist onto a bench. "Coordinating," she told nurses. "Escalating," she told me. "Stay neutral," she told Kara, praising her for calm like calm was a chore chart. The fresh wound arrived on a phone screen, a screenshot of the hospital's visitor list with my name crossed by a red dash. "For Alan's stress," she said, sweet as tea left too long. The nurse at the desk gave me an apologetic look. Palms up. Policy is a word that washes its hands. I stood in the hallway listening to an four-pump click time into bags. In the window, my reflection looked like someone already removed from his own life. Tidy, polite, unnecessary. I called the next morning to ask about Dad's phone charger and heard Vivian answer his room line. "He's resting," she said. "Let me coordinate your concerns." When I finally reached him, he sounded like a man taking small, careful steps across ice. "Viv says you need rest," I said carefully. "Do you want me there tonight?" He hesitated, then told me not to make a fuss. Silence is easy to schedule when someone else controls the calendar. I hung up and wrote the word optional in my notebook, then circled it until the paper thinned. Outside, the parking lot glittered with salt, and I felt unnecessary shine. She had quietly made me optional, and optional people vanish in emergencies. The first alerts seemed harmless. Password reset requested for Dad's email, then the pharmacy account. I assumed Vivian was settling chaos into order. She loved tidy dashboards. But then Dad's paper mail started arriving at my apartment. A misdirected utility bill, a letter from the bank about online notices, a postcard reminding him to enroll in two-factor authentication. The return addresses felt like a breadcrumb trail made of glue. I called the pharmacy to ask about refills. The technician said I was not listed. Authorized family contact on file, she added, and I could hear the parentheses around the word authorized. When I drove over, the front porch looked new enough to echo. Vivian wore soft, unbranded clothes, the uniform of people who believe money is a color you can understate. Boundaries, she announced, like a product launch. He needs one voice right now. I looked past her and saw Dad on the couch, leg propped, a blanket over his knees, the remote in his hand like a credential. He waved, then glanced at Vivian the way travelers check a gate agent before moving. I'm his son, I said. And I'm coordinating, not competing. I'm not trying to control him, I said. I'm trying to confirm what's happening in his name. Which is control, she replied softly, in a softer cardigan. She smiled and shut the door with the same even pressure she used to fold towels. I sat in my car and held the postcard to the light. On the back, the indent of a ballpoint pen pressed through from another note, an outline of numbers and a scrawl that looked like a name. I photographed it, zoomed in until the pixels looked like sand, and filed it in a folder named Breadcrumbs. That night, I tried to read and kept hearing the same sentence. If I'm not in the loop, I'm the loop. I set an alarm labeled, check logs, check heart. Both sounded mechanical, but both mattered. My phone buzzed once with a text to Dad's number. Code 014223 for enrollment. Codes like that are keys. Whoever holds them writes the map. I wrote the code in my notebook and circled it twice for luck. Vivian met me on the porch with a smile and a locked door. We had dinner anyway. Her invitation arrived with a flourish emoji. She served roasted salmon and a speech. Jordan, your tiny IT job is sweet, she said, pouring wine as if tempering truth with Cabernet. But adult decisions require scale. Dad nodded slowly, his hand drifting over the table like he was feeling for the right word. I teach people to protect themselves online, I said. Scale isn't always wisdom. Vivian's smile folded away like a table you only bring out for parties. A courier rang the bell halfway through dessert. Vivian opened a thick envelope and slid out refinance papers that needed only her signature and Dad's mark. Less cognitive load, she said, like a doctor prescribing vitamins. I asked what bank. Our bank, she answered. I asked why no meeting. Because rooms exhaust him, she said. Kara checked her phone, then looked at me, the international sign for I refuse this referee job. Dad cleared his throat, a rusty hinge. If it lowers anxiety, he said softly, then we lower anxiety. I'd like to read the documents, I said. Vivian placed her hand on the stack like a paperweight. Tomorrow, she answered, after the notary. Sequence is strategy. The envelope wore a sticker. Return within 72 hours or void. Manufactured urgency is a technology that counts on politeness. I smiled at Dad. We can read together, I said. Later, Vivian repeated, cutting salmon into precise squares as if neatness could prevent questions. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door and lowered her voice. Don't create problems, Jordan, she said. I'm avoiding mess. Her phone chimed. Another alert. I imagined a dashboard with sliders named Family, Quiet, Control. Somewhere, quiet was maxed. I stepped into the night and felt my throat rehearse a sentence I hadn't chosen yet. The salmon cooled on my plate, while my appetite sorted itself into questions I couldn't swallow yet. Even the candles seemed to burn on someone else's schedule. A process server knocked, and an envelope with my name slid across tablecloth. The petition accused me of interference with necessary care and asked the judge to limit my access to Dad. It was framed like a seatbelt, protective, harmless, supposedly for everyone's good. Kara texted in a panic. Can you just apologize? I wanted to. Peace sounded like a warm bath. Instead, I made a list of what could disappear while I chased politeness. Mom's ring, the cedar box with our childhood photos, the small education account Mom built from substitute teacher pay, Dad's say in his own appointments. Attorney Camille Ellison returned my call the next morning. I'm not your litigator, she said, voice precise. But I am your mirror. Document timelines. Keep sentences short. Do not accuse, observe. She explained the difference between power of attorney and guardianship the way a ranger explains weather. One is a tool, she said. The other is a climate. Then she asked the question nobody else had. What do you need to feel like a son in this? Not, what can you win? What do you need? I needed my name to anchor something when the lights were bright. I needed to be more than an obstacle in someone else's spreadsheet. I printed a calendar and wrote down every call, every visit, every later, spoken with a soft smile. When I drove to drop off Dad's favorite raisins, the keypad code blinked red. I rang the bell and watched the porch light consider me. Vivian texted, "Leave items at the bench. He's resting." I left the raisins. I also left a note with the words, "Call me when awake." I took a photo of the note, not because I doubted my handwriting, but because proof is a habit. That night, the petition on my table glowed like an emergency exit sign you can't ignore. I made tea, opened a fresh notebook, and wrote at the top, facts, then underneath, names, dates, amounts, who said what to whom. On the second page, I wrote, feelings, then underneath, later. I slept beside the folder and woke twice to check nothing had moved. In the morning, the steam on my mug wrote quiet shapes against the window I refused to read as fate. When the porch light flicked off, I realized she was rehearsing a disappearance. Clues often look like kindness wearing a badge. In the glove compartment of the car Dad once let me borrow, I found a prepaid phone wrapped with a rubber band around a small charger. The texts were short and efficient, full of confirmation codes, links, and phrases like, "Your e-sign document is ready." The email forwarding rules on Dad's account showed a new address, an alias that rerouted anything with bank, pharmacy, or MyChart to a mailbox named Care. Team. Coordinator at followed by a domain I didn't recognize. I traced the domain to a hosting company known for disposable inboxes. The phone's browser history held 3 searches for how to add authorized user without login and 1 for notary stamp replacement. My hands shook, not because I'm delicate, but because the pattern was no longer hypothetical. I took photos. I exported logs. I wrote times down to the minute because reality is persuasive when it wears numbers. When I plugged the phone in, a notification surfaced from VK Wellness Services. Invoice paid. Thank you. I hadn't heard of them. I added it to the list on my wall. At my Tuesday class, I asked seniors to read URLs out loud before clicking so their tongues catch fraud their eyes don't. I read this invoice URL like a prayer. It ended with /autodraft. I printed it and circled the date with a red pen that bled. When I closed my laptop, my reflection looked older and more certain than I felt. Do not be the storm, I told myself. Be the barometer. That afternoon, I called the county clerk to ask a hypothetical question about recording care liens. The answer wasn't long, but it was heavy. Yes, they exist, and yes, they can quietly put a hand on a house. I stared at the wall and pictured a gentle pastel brochure explaining how to sleep while your name fades. Before dinner, I drove to Dad's, parked across the street, and watched the blinds. At exactly 6:12 p.m., a rideshare idled while a woman in a polo carried a clipboard to the door, stayed 7 minutes, and left with no bag, no notes, no measurable care. I wrote down the license plate like a child doing homework neatly, because neatness calms me. When the porch light snapped off, I felt the night accept a secret I had not agreed to keep. I decided to follow the money and the metadata wherever they led. At the bank, I asked for the fraud desk. The carpet was relentless beige. The pens were chained. A woman named Marta logged in with measured taps, her screen reflecting currents I couldn't see. I provided Dad's information and my ID, then handed over printouts I'd highlighted by category: care management, home safety upgrades, transport services. None of those vendors took insurance. Authorized agent on file, Marta said, reading. I watched the word authorized do the work of a ladder into places I couldn't reach. How can that be? I asked. Remote authorization, she answered carefully, or preset rules. She let silence stretch until meaning filled it. I requested copies. She printed, stamping each page in blue so they'd look like facts even to people who distrust paper. I signed an affidavit stating I was seeking review, not access. Words matter. I was not trying to seize. I was trying to see. Before I left, Marta lowered her voice. We don't tell you what to do, she said. but device signatures rarely lie. Outside, the parking lot felt like a runway for difficult decisions. In the car, I called the county clerk and confirmed a filing. Care contract lien pending. The fee had been cash. The notary book number on the petition didn't match the date on the affidavit. It was off by 2 pages, as if time had been shuffled like cards. I wrote everything down. When I drove away, the bank pins winked at me through the glass like small prisoners trying to be brave. I promised myself I would be boring and persistent, the exact opposite of a scandal. That night, I mapped transactions on my whiteboard with colored markers the library kids left behind after a workshop. Blue for care, green for home, red for anything labeled urgent. A neat ring of charges appeared around VK Wellness Services like satellites around a planet. In the margins, I wrote questions in block letters. Who added agent? Where was Dad? Who benefits? Each answer pointed to a polite hallway with a closed door and a sign that read, "For your convenience." The signatures pointed one way, but the timestamps pointed somewhere else entirely. The scheme developed like a photograph in a darkroom. Shapes first, then edges, then the ordinary horror of a clear picture. It wasn't a will because wills invite careful eyes. It was a cascade of services and auto drafts that looked benevolent one by one. A home safety assessment billed 6 hours to replace batteries. A transport concierge charged monthly to call the same taxi company we'd always used. VK Wellness Services sat in the middle of everything like a hub wearing a halo. Camille explained the temporary guardianship petition the way a pilot explains turbulence. A bridge move that can reposition who speaks when doctors or bankers ask, especially if someone says conflict. It's not always malicious, she said, but it is always powerful. I diagrammed it on my whiteboard. Accounts rerouted, mail redirected, signatures captured with convenience. Each piece lawful enough to slide under a tired clerk's day. The invoices listed services no one asked for: memory stimulation sessions, light meal prep, transport scheduling, home environment audits. Dad's calendar showed none of those visits. I cross-checked IP addresses from the eSign portal with rehab gym schedules and found overlaps that made my stomach drop. Smart scammers don't steal, Camille said. They persuade systems to pay them willingly. I thought of Mom's ring again. The one with the tiny nick where she'd shut a drawer too fast the week before I learned to ride a bike. VK's newest invoice included an asset protection consultation, a phrase that sounded like a padlock but behaved like a funnel. I drew a circle around the line item and wrote, in capital letters, "Not yours." At the bottom of one PDF, a note read, "Family agreement on file." I looked for it and found only an unsigned template with blanks where names should be. That emptiness felt intentional, a vacuum waiting to be filled by the loudest person in the room. I printed the page and taped it above my desk with a sticky note. Agreements are not echoes. If there was an agreement, it would breathe. This one was a shadow. Mom's ring, once promised to me, was suddenly marked for compassionate liquidation. I started a folder called Facts. Inside went everything dated, signed, and traced. Screenshots of forwarding rules, ISP logs pulled with a supervisor's help at the library, the bank's printouts, and a clean recording of the voicemail where I approved a pharmacy transfer at 2:04 p.m. while I was teaching a class on reporting scam calls. Camille drafted a letter requesting the hospital list me as Dad's information designee for technology and security, citing my work and years of support. We scheduled a meeting at the bank's fraud desk. I invited Kara because witnessing matters, and because I wanted her to see the difference between conflict and clarity. I packed spare copies. I labeled tabs. I printed a one-page timeline with verbs that didn't accuse: received, observed, noted, verified. In my pocket, I placed a photo of Mom's handwriting to hold like a compass. I rehearsed what I would say, and then rehearsed saying less. Anger is a flare. It burns bright and tells everyone where you are, including people aiming at you. I wanted to be a lighthouse instead, steady, repetitive, impossible to ignore. The night before, I slept badly and dreamed of stamps falling like hail. In the morning, I ironed a shirt, the one you wear when authority matters, but swagger would be a mistake. On my way out, I almost left the raisins I'd bought for Dad on the counter. I went back, tucked them into my bag, and laughed at myself for believing small kindness could balance big math. But kindness keeps your hands open when paperwork tries to make fists. On the bus, I held the folder on my lap like a child and counted traffic lights to slow my heart. We passed the hospice thrift store where Vivian used to volunteer. The window held a lamp shaped like a lighthouse. I took it as a dare from the universe and decided to live up to my own metaphor. When the bus hissed to a stop, I rewound the voicemail once more and listened for the breath at the start, the breath I knew wasn't mine. That detail would be my anchor in a room designed to float. I was ready to be small and relentless, the most patient kind of storm. The close call came in a fluorescent hallway that smelled like hand gel and overcooked carrots. Vivian intercepted me outside Dad's rehab gym, wearing soft gray and the expression of a saint photographed through gauze. "You're stressing him," she said, loud enough for nurses to overhear. Elder abuse isn't always bruises. Dad shuffled behind her, eyes unsure. "Jordan," he said, and my name sounded like a loose screw in his mouth. "We just need quiet. Shame is quicksand that looks like carpet." "Quiet helps," I said, "but clarity helps more." Vivian's eyes narrowed, an aperture taking less light. "You can still stop this," she said. "Withdraw your objections, and we can craft a family solution." Family had become a word with fees. "Then let's be a family in a room with facts," I replied. A nurse wheeled a cart between us, and we both stepped back like dancers at the edge of an unpracticed move. She leaned in so close I could see the foundation line under her jaw, perfectly blended until it wasn't. "You don't understand how reputations work," she said. "Yours is fragile." She tapped her phone, and a notification flashed. Somewhere, a post had gone live with a version of me I didn't recognize. Kara texted a single word, "Here." I straightened, nodded at the nurse, and walked away because some fights win by happening later. In the elevator, I stared at my reflection under bad lighting and remembered Camille's advice. Facts, timestamps, signatures. I whispered them like a three-word creed. When the doors opened, I took a slow breath and counted backward from 5 the way I teach my students when a pop-up shouts urgency. I am not a pop-up. I will not be clicked. Downstairs, I bought a bottle of water and stood by the vending machines until my pulse decided to be boring again. 2 orderlies debated baseball like the world was ordinary, and their normal voices steadied me more than any affirmation app could. I texted Camille, "Meeting still on." She replied with a thumbs up and the words, "Let the paper speak." I slid my phone into my pocket like a promise and headed for the exit. She leaned close enough to fog my glasses and promised to ruin me publicly. We met in a small bank conference room where all the art prints were sailboats. Marta from the fraud desk set up a screen share. The notary registrar joined by phone, voice crisp as a new bill. Camille sat at my left. Kara at my right held a paper cup of water like a tiny heartbeat. Vivian arrived exactly on time, wearing a brooch shaped like a leaf. "Let's be efficient," she said. I clicked open the folder labeled Facts. First, the transfers. VK Wellness Services LLC to personal accounts linked to a last name I recognized from Vivian's cousin. Next, the e-sign logs. IP addresses originating from the house at times Dad was in physical therapy. Then, the pharmacy call. A recording of my voice authorizing a switch to mail order. I pressed play and paused. "Listen to the breath at the start," I said. "I don't breathe like that." The registrar asked for the notary number on the refinance document. Vivian provided it without looking at the page, like a student reciting. Pages rustled on the phone line. "Hold, please," the registrar said. We held. My pulse counted ceiling tiles. Marta leaned forward, eyes on device signatures like a meteorologist reading pressure systems. "The commission expired last year," the registrar said when she returned. The sentence rearranged the chairs. "And the device signature is unambiguous," Marta added. Vivian smiled with a new shape, the kind people wear when they think survival lives in charm. "Clerical mistakes happen," she said. "The family is aligned." "I'm family," I said gently, "and I'm not aligned with fraud." The word rattled in the air vent and came back the same. Camille placed a highlighted copy of the guardianship petition beside the notary log. "We're asking for a pause," she said. "A reset to baseline until the court hears evidence." Kara's fingers crushed the paper cup, water climbing the rim and trembling. Vivian didn't look at her. She looked at me, then at the door, calculating the weight of leaving versus staying. I pressed play again and let my forged breath fill the room. The room held its breath as my counterfeit voice echoed back at us. The registrar spoke first. That notary number can't be a clerical error. It belongs to a registrar in another county. Marta added. And the device signature is unambiguous. Camille laid out the guardianship petition and highlighted the phrases that had followed me like gnats: erratic, obstructive, destabilizing. We have affidavits from Jordan's students placing him at the library during the alleged calls, she said. Vivian didn't break. She recalibrated, like a screen adjusting brightness. Alan has struggled, she said, voice warm enough to melt corners. I've filled gaps no one else would. Dad's hand shook, then steadied. No one asked you to be alone in it, I said. You chose alone and then charged rent. It came out quieter than I expected and stronger than I felt. Camille kept her tone soft. Less chaos comes from clear roles, she said. Not hidden accounts or misdirected mail. I slid a small plastic bag across the table, the prepaid phone. Texts with confirmation codes, I said. Searches for notary replacements. Vivian watched it the way a snake watches a flute. Wary, insulted, but curious about the ending. Then I handed Dad the raisins. He turned the bag in his hands, reading the label like scripture. You remembered, he said, quiet and clear. Vivian looked at Kara, seeking a bounce back of allegiance that didn't arrive. Kara whispered, Viv, this is too much. The registrar asked why VK Wellness Services ownership listed a Langley cousin. Vivian's throat moved. It was a bridge, she said. Bridges can be beautiful. They can also be tolls. On the speaker, paper rustled. We'll flag the instruments for review, the registrar said. Marta clicked through 2 more screens and read a phrase I didn't expect to hear outside a movie. Suspected identity misuse. The words weren't angry. They were administrative, and that made them heavier. I exhaled and realized I'd been breathing like someone underwater for weeks. His eyes found mine, and fear replaced denial like a switch flipping. After that, time moved in steps. The bank froze accounts linked to VK Wellness Services pending investigation. Camille filed for a temporary restraining order, removing Vivian as agent until a hearing. Kara cried in the parking lot like the air had been snatched away, then apologized to me for months of gentle complicity. Online, Vivian posted a paragraph about toxic adult children, and 3 neighbors liked it before unliking it. I missed work to file forms and answer calls. A volunteer from the registrar's office phoned to confirm details. Her voice sounded like someone who knows how many stamps it takes to fix a small town. The house changed tone. Mail arrived at the right address again. The porch light stopped flickering. Dad called me without speakerphone and asked, "What time is physical therapy?" Like the question itself was a signpost back to him. At night I scrolled too long. People tried to shrink me into a headline. Some friends went quiet because conflict is a mirror they don't want to face. I bought a second set of sheets so stress wouldn't turn laundry into crisis. Progress came small and dull. Filing numbers, calendar invites, a bag of raisins in the pantry where it belonged. I also paid a debt I owed myself. I sat on the floor with the cedar box open and repaired a torn photo of Mom with archival tape. The rip ran through her smile and stopped at her eye. When I finished, I placed her ring on its velvet square and closed the lid. Down the block, wind chimes decided there was a breeze. The next morning a process server knocked on Vivian's door. The look on her face in the window wasn't shock. It was calculation learning it had miscounted. I drove to the library and taught my class on passwords. We practiced saying no to pop UPS like rehearsing a line in a play, polite, firm, repeatable. After, one student pressed a peppermint into my hand and said, "You're doing fine, honey." I put it in my pocket like a medal. Consequences had finally arrived, but they never come without their own price. Boundaries, it turns out, are carpentry. We made them visible. The court fashioned a limited guardianship tailored to Dad's actual needs. Medical appointments require 2 signatures. Financial decisions above a set amount trigger review. Passwords live in a manager we access together from separate logins. Dad learned to use a simple authenticator app. His grin when he approved a sign-in could have powered the porch light all winter. Camille helped write a shared access plan in language even our worst afternoons could understand. On Saturday, I brought the cedar box home. We put Mom's ring where it belonged, on velvet beside a photo of her laughing with her head tilted back like she trusted the sky. Dad touched the ring, closed his eyes, and whispered, "She'd like this system." In the kitchen, I installed a small whiteboard listing 3 things: meds, appointments, joy. Under joy, Dad wrote, raisins. At night, we watched an old movie with subtitles because brain recovery loves clean lines. When a courtroom scene flashed, Dad flinched, then didn't. We're okay, he said, almost to himself. I nodded and showed him again how to tap a notification, how to read a request, how to say yes with his finger. Teaching your parent to be safe online is a reversal that can hurt. We treated it like a craft. The porch light stayed steady. The door code stayed the same. Vivian moved into a smaller apartment across town. Once, at the grocery store, we passed each other by the apples. She lifted a gala and examined it like a paperweight. I nodded. She nodded back. We continued in opposite directions under the same fluorescent weather. Kara came over with a stack of sticky notes in cheerful colors and labeled drawers in Dad's desk. Insurance, health, home, fun. We argued about whether fun deserved a drawer and then gave it the biggest one. For the first time in months, organizing felt like making room instead of taking it. When we finished, Dad held up the label maker like a trophy and asked for ice cream. On a quiet Tuesday, Dad squeezed my hand and asked to start fresh. I filmed my hands showing Dad how to unlock his phone with a gentle thumb press and a patient breath, and he laughed at how a small circle could be a door. At the library, I added a slide to my class. If someone says it's about love, ask for logs. I'm not the hero of a courtroom drama. I'm a person who kept receipts long enough for truth to collect interest. Money is loud, but dignity is steady. The digital world likes to tell us we're replaceable and out of date. Dad's relief when he signed into his patient portal without help argued otherwise. Kara and I take turns on Tuesdays bringing something sweet. She brings lemon bars that crumble like good news. I bring raisins and a joke about predictable people. Sometimes Dad tells me about the first time he saw my mother at the thrift store, reaching for a box, laughing. We keep the whiteboard clean. We throw away envelopes with urgent in red because urgency has to earn its place now. When neighbors ask how he's doing, we answer with boring sentences, the kind stability writes slowly. He's resting better. Therapy helps. Passwords are organized. Boring is a luxury when you've lived in crisis. I print instructions in large type so nobody has to squint to find their own name. I still wake sometimes thinking about stamps and signatures and how a lowercase letter can move a life. Then I make tea, check the shared log, and go back to bed because vigilance can be gentle too. I don't know what Vivian tells herself now. I know what I tell myself when the quiet feels suspicious. You took back what was yours without becoming what you fought. Tomorrow I'll teach again, and the slide will wait where I left it. After class, an older man lingered to show me a photo of his wife on his lock screen. I'm learning this because she can't, he said, tapping the phone twice like gratitude. We stood together in the doorway while the building settled, metal popping softly in the vents. It's slower now, he added, but it's ours. I walked home under a sky that looked like fresh paper and felt the day agree. And someday soon, I'll sleep without listening for a door quietly changing locks.